Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Eden Road podcast, where on today's episode, we're going to be going over the 0-0 draw at Goodison Park on Saturday. Craig, how are we doing, mate?
Yeah, very good. Happy with a clean sheet for once this season.
Exactly that. Dan, how are we?
Yeah, all good. As far as 0-0s go, I quite enjoyed it and I thought it was quite a good away end again. So, yeah, all good.
It was. And we do have Callum for an unknown amount of time. For now, we have Callum. Callum, how are we?
I'm all good. Listen, this is a lottery, so put your bets in now. How long this Virgin Media Wi-Fi is going to work for today? So we'll roll with it. But nice to be back, everyone. Hope everyone's well after a clean sheet. We're buzzing. So yes, thank you. We'll keep it brief. Let's move on.
Good stuff. Good stuff, Callum. Just before we get going, remember to drop a comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels, and also give us a follow on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Boys, let's just get straight into it. Craig, I'll come to you first. Initial thoughts.
Going into the game, I kind of thought that we was actually going to get all 3 points, and this was going to be the first away game of the season, that we come back to London with 3 points in the bag, but it wasn't to be. But when you go down to 10 men in the first half and you can hold any team out, it doesn't really matter any team in the Premier League who it is, if you can hold them out for 45 minutes, then anything is deserved from that point onwards. So it's a good point, but I expected more going into it at the start. Come the end of the game, I absolutely would have taken that given the circumstances.
Dan, what do you think, mate? Because obviously our record against Deitch, I would have probably said that I would have taken a point going into it, considering how impeccable his record against Thomas Frank is. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I don't think it would have been celebrated as much as this point ended up being celebrated when the final whistle went. It was almost like a win. And I think when you get that red card so early on as well, you kind of mentally prepare yourself that we're probably not going to get anything out of this from that point onwards. And I thought we did show good character and good mentality. And at times we have criticised that side of us and that game management side of us. We did start to soak up the clock a bit. So I think we actually handled it very, very well. I do also think probably if you're going to go down to 10 men, you probably would choose Everton to go up against, because they don't look to dominate the ball as much. Of course, they still had more of the ball, but their primary way of attacking was still to just get crosses in, and we could still deal with that with 10 men with the likes of Collins and Pinnock at the back. So, yeah, I was pleased with it, and it was nice to tick off milestones in terms of getting a point on the road and keeping a clean sheet as well.
Callum, when it kind of got to those last 45, and you mentioned it there, Dan, I want to say Everton are the lowest scorers or the second lowest scorers in the league this season behind someone else. But I think that they don't score a lot. Did you ever think at any point in the game, Callum, that we were going to concede? Because as we mentioned, like we had that kind of same thought process against Bournemouth when we were 3-2 up. We were kind of waiting for them to score. And it's obviously happened a few times this season and a few times last season as well, conceding quite late on. But I actually thought probably down to 10 men, that was our best defensive display of the season, Callum.
Yeah, absolutely. I did obviously have the same concerns as what you raised there, Mike. I was seriously concerned that there was going to be just that one lapse of concentration that would lead to, a single goal being scored. Like last season, we went to Goodison. They had one opportunity and they took it, and it was a 1-0 win for them at the end of the day. But we performed incredibly well. And I must say, and Deitch did talk about this, it was actually more difficult for them to play against 10. We became more compact and difficult to break down. So yes, I did have those concerns there, but best defensive display all season. We actually, I feel, had the better opportunities in the match. Just couldn't put them away. Worcester and obviously Lewis Potter. But no, very comprehensive, but we must go forward from here. We must keep more clean sheets. So I'm hopeful it starts again on Saturday and we move on from there.
We'll talk about Saturday, because obviously the big news yesterday was that Steve Cooper's been sacked by Leicester, which means that there's a little bit more in that game now, I think. And a few Brentford fans have been tweeting stuff like that this week anyway. But Craig, I think it was a similar pattern to the last two games in that we started really slowly, but we did grow into it. I'll hand over to you for a bit of Mark Flecken love, because there was a really good save in that first 15 minutes where I think it's Idrissa Gana Gay on the edge of the box has like a snapshot. It takes a deflection and Flecken has to reset quite quickly. But his performance as a whole, Craig, big boost for him coming into the game. Considering, did you guys see that he got a bit of negative press after being away on international duty with the Netherlands? I think there were some Dutch fans that were after him for something. I didn't manage to see the highlights, but a big boost for him, Craig, to get his first clean sheet of the season.
Well, that clean sheet part won't be just a boost for him. It'll be a boost for all of the defence in front of him as well. So we absolutely take a clean sheet in any game. But we spoke about it so much last season, not so much the latter part of the season and this season, that he needs to start earning points. And a game like Saturday, I feel like we can all kind of agree that he's at least got us 1 point out of that game. And it's the other end of the pitch, not putting the ball in the back of the net, that hasn't got us 3. So he's earning the team points and he's showing his value now as a goalkeeper. And I feel like maybe it's just taken a little bit of time, took a bit longer than what we originally hoped for. But yeah, he did really well, made a couple of really good, important saves yesterday. And he does it a lot more often than people like to admit now. Making these good saves and things like that. But because we've been scoring so many goals recently, especially at home, the good saves that he does make don't necessarily get highlighted as much because of how many we're putting in the other net. So a tight game like this has highlighted that he is actually a good goalkeeper. People just need someone to dislike.
I gave him a bit of stick in my latest YouTube video when I was talking about some things that we learned about Brentford. I don't know if you boys saw it, but his one-on-one capabilities and that dinked finish that I think I've seen so many times this season, I think he needs to get better in those situations. But having said that, like when we're getting peppered with shots like we have been in the last few games, he does make important saves, and he did that in the first half. But we weathered that kind of storm, Dan, and then it was kind of one of those chances for Wissa where you're from the away end and you can't judge the depth. So I didn't know that he was behind in on goal on the Everton defence. And then when you kind of see that, I think it was Branthwaite that's like the covering centre back, kind of comes across and then he's behind Wissa, then you're thinking, well, I was just waiting for the net to bulge, because we've said it so many times that when he gets into these situations, you just don't think he's going to miss. So surprised to see him not bury that, Dan, on his left foot.
Yeah, and from where we were, you also have to think about whether it was offside, and you can't tell from where we are. So even if it went in, I'm like, do I celebrate or do I not celebrate? Is it definitely going to count? But obviously, it was offside. It was onside. Sorry, seeing the replay, and I'm very shocked that he didn't score. But I suppose it happens to even the best sometimes. Even Erling Haaland sometimes runs through on goal and doesn't score. So it does happen. I think Pickford is quite a good one-on-one keeper as well. I think he'll get out to you. He won't, give you the time and space to pick your finish. He'll get in your face, and he did. I think he'll be disappointed with that. But I think he's given us enough this season that we can let him off on this one.
For sure. I think we're going to talk about when Wissa went off, and sort of Bryan's game in general against Everton. But I've actually engineered this quite nicely. I'm going to hand over to you, Callum, for the big talking point. I think that would be quite fitting on your return to the pod.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
There wasn't too much else after that Wissa chance in the first half. And then, I like, it was so bizarre from the away end, because like the foul wasn't given. There was no kind of indication that it was going to go to VAR. And then all of a sudden it comes up on the screen. Callum, your thought?
It just wasn't a red card. Let's be honest. As Thomas Frank touched upon afterwards, he said in his own words, the rules in football have changed. If you're giving a red card for something like that, we're not playing tag rugby or something like that. Like, flipping it. Like, come on, it's a contact sport. He's entitled to go for that ball. And I touch upon it quite a lot, but there's no consistency. Like, I look at Adam Lallana yesterday, and although that was slightly lower, he's got his studs up, he's slightly off the ground, and yet they haven't even really bothered. They've given him a yellow card, and I'm thinking to myself, there's no consistency. Why is VAR not getting involved in that when it was a bad foul? And what gets me, I mean, Pickford likes to make a lot out of nothing. I mean, this is what he's like as a player. I despise him. I can't wait for him to come to the G-Tech, to be honest with you. He gives it all that when really he's a nothing keeper, to be honest with you. It's true facts. He will spend all his time at Everton. He won't do anything when it matters, realistically. But for me, what makes it laughable for me, and it's again, Thomas Frank touched upon this, and I will use it in my quotes. You've got Tarkowski standing right next to the next to the open play. You've got Calvert-Lewin again standing next to the play as well. None of them have gone up and appealed, apart from Pickford. So, and you've got a referee who's in charge like that. The caliber of the referee, let him stick with his decision. I don't even think he was certain about it as well. I think he should have grown a pair there and said, listen, I ain't giving this as a red card because, why? It's true. It's ridiculous. So I expect again, if this happens again, we have this conversation. I've said this countless times on this program. There needs to be consistency, and there isn't any. They just make it up as they go along. But this is the Premier League. So anyway.
Dan Craig, do you want to weigh in?
I'm not sure in terms of obviously Thomas Frank said that he is going to appeal it. I'm not sure that we will be successful in that appeal though. Everything looks worse slowed down. Obviously, the actual incident happened very quickly. He was clearly trying to get the ball. He wasn't intending to do that to Pickford because why would he do that? Pickford knows that. The Everton players know that. That's why no one claimed for it. So I do agree with the majority of what Callum said. But I do think when they look at the appeal, though, they will consider it as reckless or dangerous. And there is that slight movement just before the contact where he does kind of stick his leg out a bit more.
But this is up a bit more. I'm gonna. You can finish if you want, but I'm gonna butt in with something I thought of when I was.
Go on, Callum.
What argument are we gonna have here if Norgaard gets to the ball first, right? Puts the ball in the back of the net and then takes Pickford out. What are we going to say then? Is it then a high tackle because he's then followed through and taken the man afterwards? Why? This is an argument that should be said. Would they? Do you think, Dan, they would look at that if he gets to the ball first, puts that ball in the back of the net like he was trying to do, and then takes Pickford? Do you think then they then say, oh yeah, we should probably have a look at this, and then oh yeah, we should give him a red card? What do you think? What do you think?
It's difficult. Maybe they would give a free kick and give a red, but I think it does depend on who you've got in VAR on that given day. Because I don't necessarily think everyone would have intervened. That's the issue and the inconsistency. Obviously, the referee, like you said, didn't give anything at all. I couldn't even see the screen from where I was because the roof was so low. So I didn't even realise at first that we even went to VAR. It's just one of those difficult ones. But I do think when we go to appeal it, they will look at the letter of the law, and the letter of the law will say that if it studs up and it's high and it's deemed reckless or whatever, then I don't think we'll be successful with an appeal. But I think it's worth a go, and I definitely don't think it should have been a red, and it's not proportionate to how it made us play for the rest of the game. It ruined the game a little bit, and the punishment isn't proportionate for the crime, given that there was absolutely no intent there whatsoever.
I've got a friend who's an Everton fan, and they sit in the stand, which is next to the away end, so the opposite end to where it happened anyway. And they said to me, everyone that was in and around me was adamant that it was going to VAR for a penalty, because they was like, there's no way we get a VAR decision here going in our favour. So they all thought, oh bloody hell, there's going to be a Brentford penalty here, and then it turns out that Norgaard gets sent off. But they said that doesn't happen to them very often. But my mind goes straight to like the Onyeka foul last year at Sheffield United when he absolutely clatters that player and doesn't get sent off for it. Yeah, this is like an innocuous challenge, going for the ball and get sent off. I also think about two of Josh Da Silva's red cards when he got sent off against Spurs in the semi-final, the League Cup or whatever it was back then in COVID. And he got sent off because he tried to turn a player and accidentally stood on him. And then I'm certain he did the same thing against Newcastle later in the season, tried to turn a player, got sent off, ball was broken down the other end of the pitch, and then they sent him off and gave a free kick on the edge of our box. you kind of got to agree, believe it or not, with Callum and say that there is just no consistency with VAR, is there?
I just think they make things up as they go along, to be honest with you. I mean, they've got to make it entertaining and give Gallagher a job on a Monday, isn't it? But
it's all a matter of opinion, isn't it? There's only one fact in football now, and that's offsides.
They're incompetent. That's what. I'll bring that word back. The referees are incompetent because realistically, they just make stuff as they go along. But anyway,
bring back David Coote.
Bring back David Coote. It's all gone quiet on him at the moment. I agree. Justice for David Coote is what I say.
Justice for David Coote. No one likes Liverpool anyway.
Talk about because obviously when the screen came up, I immediately went to Twitter at halftime and saw the screenshots, and you see his studs up on Pickford's knee. So I was thinking, well, I mean, if your studs are that high in today's game, then it is a red card. But what I want to talk about, I was listening to the Rest is Football the other day, and they were talking about whether they should mic referees up. Or something like along those kind of lines. In that situation, when you're in the away end and the screen just comes up and they show one replay of the tackle from one angle, everyone's going to kick off, and it just there's no clarity whatsoever behind the decision. And if there was similar to, I know this is like a conversation that's been had so many times, but similar to what they did in rugby with the TMO, if they just had the referee on the mic and say, this is what we're checking, this is why we're checking it, and then they could just say whatever the decision is, or they could show maybe another replay, then there's just less controversy. But would you, when we were in the away end on Saturday, first of all, the screen goes up for no reason whatsoever. We have no idea what they're checking, and then they show one replay. It's just a bit shit. Your experience as an away fan is just terrible. As a home fan, even when there's no conversations going on about why they're checking it, it's just poor. Well, any thoughts on that? Would we like to see?
They trialled it in the Women's World Cup, didn't they? And then it all went quiet after that. And I think they trialled it over in America or something like that as well. But yeah, I think, I do agree. I think they should mic up the referees, and we should be able to hear what is being said and justify why they are making these decisions. But to be honest with you, I know why they don't want to do it, because it then is another talking point, because then you're listening into what's being decided, what they're talking out on a point by point situation. They won't do it, Mike. They won't do it. It's because there'll be too much controversy behind it, and then they can't be bothered. Just
bring in post-match referee interviews.
Well, they should. I've said this before. They should. Absolutely. You're paid enough to go through and referee a game, which, to be honest with you, half the time they're not, because VAR is doing it for them. Or even the linesman, because, again, they don't do anything. They just stand there. I mean, if anyone wants an easy job, that's the best job in the world, to be honest with you, in the Premier League, because they don't do anything. They don't even do that, Craig. They don't even do that. We saw it at Fulham very recently, where the linesman's just like, well, I don't even know what to give. He's in his own little cuckoo land, isn't he? So, anyway, never mind.
You'd love to see a Strava after a game, wouldn't you? For a liner, it'd just literally be like that, up for literally one line.
Norgaard obviously is the one that got sent off, boys. Lots of chat about him recently. Thoughts on? I mean, you can't really look into it because we've just had a big conversation about how we all thought it wasn't a red card, or whether or not you think it was a red or not, but. Just, Dan, I'll come to you on Norgaard. He's getting a lot of stick at the moment. We've spoken about it in the last one. Had a conversation with someone on Twitter talking about how if someone's going to be the six, it should be Janelt. I think Norgaard's the best six at the club. But there's two bad games, and then Everton, the red card. I don't think he was having a bad game before he got sent off. But just that kind of chat about Norgaard and Janelt at the moment, Dan.
Well, it might be that Janelt gets a chance to showcase himself as that number 6 next weekend if we're without Norgaard. So we can all contrast and compare. But I think when Norgaard was out earlier this season, we were probably saying how much we missed Christian Norgaard. So it's very up and down based on the form he's in at the time. I think he will return to somewhere near his best, and I think we need him in the team still. This game in particular, you want him to go for that cross. You don't expect him to necessarily pull out maybe the very last second. But like we said, it all happens so quick. The ball flashes across the box. You stick your foot out. That whole action happened in about 2 or 3 seconds. So it's, if he is expected to pull out, it's going to be a very, very late thing, and he may not be able to do that in time. So yeah, I don't blame him at all for that. You'd want him to go for that. You want him to stick his leg out. And if he does stick his leg out and he scores, then I don't think anyone's giving them any stick at the end of the game if we were 1-0 and he's got the goal. So yeah, I think it's just a momentary blip. And like Ethan Pinnock, and we've had the same sort of conversation about him this season. I think, they'll both return to their levels. And I think obviously defensively, I think we did see that from Pinnock this weekend at least as well.
What's killing me is that's I'm going to use air quotes here, serious foul play that the red card was given for, which means Norgaard is banned for 3 games, not just the 1 game now. He's out for 3 games. So unless we do appeal it, Dan, like you said, Norgaard, Janel's going to get 3 games as at the 6 to see how that goes. But 3 games.
Bring back Onyeka, that's what I say. Listen,
3-game ban for that's crazy.
No, yeah. Well, I think silver lining is that we might see a bit more of Fabio Carvalho, which would be nice. I've been fucking calling for that all season long. But the second half, we mentioned that the red card ruined the game. So, I mean, thoughts on the second half, Craig? How did you see it? It was a bit dull, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, we said it at the beginning. When you spend 50, I think it was 50 minutes playing as 10 men, the main objective becomes don't concede. And the number of stupid goals that we have conceded this season, I'm just so glad that we didn't, drop to that standard that we have seen recently in our defensive work. But we've been calling for a clean sheet all season as well. And when you're down to 10 men and you're just going to defend, like Dan said at the start, you probably couldn't have really asked for a better team so far this season to have to play against with 10 men, because they just weren't going to score. They weren't going to score.
They were really, really poor, like so bad. This is probably the worst Everton performance I've seen since we've been in the Premier League, and they fucking spanked us at home last season. So, I want to talk about the KLP chance because that's probably the only one that we really had in the second half, and then we'll talk about some players. But again, Callum, we've kind of spoken about it before. In terms of KLP, when he gets into these positions, he just has a thing when he just shoots straight at the keeper. And obviously, I think it comes back out to Jensen, who cannons it over the bar. But I actually think he probably made the wrong decision because you've got Wissa who's running straight through, and you've got Bryan as well on the right. If he feeds Wissa, then defender comes across and Bryan's got like a free shot on goal. But we need to be seeing more from KLP in these attacking positions, don't we, Callum?
Yeah, it's unfortunate he gets himself into these promising positions and just, I don't know if it's hesitation or it's very hard to pinpoint exactly kind of, what it is as such that he gets himself into, he does everything else right. He's got the pace, he's direct, he causes so many problems for, defensive back line. But we've said it for many, many years since we signed him, from Hull, that it's just his finishing touch. Whether he needs that goal to then kick on, we'll have to wait and see. But it is frustration. I think from Wissa I could see on Saturday, and also in Mbeumo, as you rightfully say, Mike, he could have passed it through to Wissa. He had a very good opportunity there as well. But I think he's looking for that goal. He had some really good opportunities at home in the past few weeks. The Bournemouth game, in particular, I think he had a few, and also Ipswich, I think he had one blocked in a very good position as well. So, but it just needs that goal. And I'm hoping it's going to be this weekend. I fully back him this weekend to get that goal.
You've said that before.
I've said that before. It didn't happen, but look, this is why I don't bet. So there you go. Listen, KLP, if you're watching, I'm banking you on you. I'm banking that you're going to score this weekend. So.
You mentioned Mbeumo there, Callum. Before we talk about Igor Thiago, which I think was absolutely so good to see him in a Brentford shirt. Bryan's performance, Dan, thoughts?
It was one of those ones where I feel like if we don't get forward very much to team, I don't feel like he seems to have much impact on the games. And the thing is, when we don't get forward much, the 1 or 2 times he does get it in a promising position on his side, he needs to do a bit better than putting a cross that hits the first man or something like that, which is what I felt that he was doing a little bit against Everton. I know it's difficult. I feel like if we can get him high volume chances, he will produce something out of one or two of them. But I feel like still maybe some consistency when he does get the ball in that area that we need from him. I feel like there's been a bit of a contrast in certain games. Certain games like those 3 or 4 home games that we've had where we've scored 4 or 5 goals and we've been free flowing, great. But there's been a few away games, a Fulham game, this one against some of the bigger teams as well, where we don't create as much. And I just feel like we just want to see a bit more from him. We need our talisman, our big players to step up when we're not creating as much in games to provide that one moment to perhaps win the game. And obviously we're looking at Whistler too, and we're looking at Mbeumo at the moment with the records that both of those have. But again, if we look at his season overall in terms of his numbers, we can't criticize him too much. I don't think.
No.
Yeah.
No, you can't complain. He's the goals, the moments. He's
I
a big.
He was in my fantasy team this weekend, and he didn't do anything. So
Yeah, so was Wiss. Wiss was in mine as
Shocking.
well. That was the first. That must have been one of their first double blanks. I know. So Paul.
Shocking.
Anyway, Craig, let's talk about Igor Thiago because I think that was such a great risk. I can't remember a player coming or signing for Brentford and getting that. Because obviously it's compounded by the fact that we signed him, record fee, and it's been waiting all the way since January last year, and gets injured in pre-season. But I don't remember giving that kind of reception to any Brentford player before. It kind of felt special, didn't it? I thought.
The last one I can think of is kind of when Jota had his second stint when he came back from Spain.
Yeah, good shout.
And he came back then, and I remember, I think I have a real strange feeling that it was like Eastleigh in the cup or something like that when Martin Allen was their manager as well, and he came on, and but that's the last time I remember giving someone a reception like that, or seeing a reception like that, and after the game as well, seeing him in front of the away end like that was really good. I just hope that it means that we can have sort of players playing in natural positions, but I am worried about Wissa because I think we can all agree that Wissa is more impactful in the team when he plays through the middle and not as a wide player. And I don't think Wissa's in a place where we can drop him at the moment. So does that mean we then move him out wide? It's a really good football headache for a manager to be able to actually have players that aren't injured in the team. But yeah, really, really happy to see him finally get some minutes.
I wonder if that, because you can't really imagine Frank shifting out of a 4-3-3 when we're playing teams below us. So it would mean that either one of KLP or Wissa is dropped, kind of pushes Sharda further down the pecking order as well. But it's a good problem to have. But I've been scratching my head and thinking about it over the last few days, Dan. I just don't because he's our record signing. He's a traditional number 9. He's great at pressing. But we, like you mentioned, Craig, we have always said that Wissa looks so much better through the middle, and he scored 7 goals from 9 appearances this season. So it is like, how does it work? Obviously, he's going to take a bit of time to get up to speed, and I don't expect him to be starting in the next couple of weeks. He'll probably still be behind Wissa until he gets up to match fitness. But it is a good headache to have, Dan, right?
Obviously, yeah, I think so, definitely. I think they're very different profiles, so that is something that stands out. If they were the same kind of striker, then you kind of think we don't really need both of these here if they're both fit and firing. But you can definitely see when a game would call for someone like Thiago. And I think because we were down to 10 men, because we were going a bit longer against Everton just to try and relieve us of pressure and hopefully get up the other end of the pitch, it was a game that for Thiago. And I thought his physicality up against, I think Everton probably have one of the stronger, more physical defensive pairings. Was very good to see. He was winning his duels. I think he'll have even more luck against certain other teams. And you can see what he brings that Wissa doesn't bring and how they can perhaps complement each other if they ever did play together as well. And of course, with these left back issues, I wouldn't rule out KLP being at left back and then you still playing Wissa, Thiago and Mbeumo as the front three if KLP is a longer term left back. But I don't think that's much of a solution either in terms of solving that issue. Although I did see someone on Facebook suggest that KLP should be considered for an England call up at left back.
Do you know what? That's actually not a bad shout. He's been fucking brilliant there this season. That's hilarious.
Need needs a bit more from him. Need him to be there a little bit longer, I reckon, before we start talking about that.
Yeah. Callum, the defensive performance, first clean sheet this season. I thought Collins was excellent again. Pinnock had a really good game. As we mentioned, Mark Flecken at the top of the show. Great defensive performance. Like, take us home, Callum. Concluding thoughts on the Everton game.
Oh, thank you, Mike, for giving me this opportunity. First of all, that's greatly appreciated. Well, honestly, I think fantastic. You know, we've always struggled at Goodison Park. You know, the only time we've won there was when Everton had 9 men. So, and even then, we struggled to a 3-2 win only a few seasons ago. So, great, but we have to kick on now, and I can certainly see it happening this weekend, although Leicester are a bit of a bogey side for us. So, but what I would like is to go and score an early goal, kick on, let's get behind the team, and let's go and win 3-0. As I say, we're going to have KLP scoring on Saturday. We will have this conversation next week, and you will thank me. So there you go. 3-0 win for Brentford on Saturday, climbing up towards European football next season. Thank you, and good night.
Well, I was just saying, take us home from the Everton game. We were going to do the preview.
Oh, right. Oh, my bad. I can. Okay, never mind. Listen, never mind. Yeah, well, listen, it was a great performance. We saw the game out, and Thomas Frank, although he was slightly pissed off, as what he would say, with the red card, was very happy with the draw. So there we go. I'll take you out from there, but there we go. Thank you very much.
Craig, I'll come to you for Leicester. Obviously, we mentioned it already. Steve Cooper's been sacked. So it now does look like a little bit of a potential banana skin. How are you feeling ahead of it? Obviously, it was important to get a point at Everton, I think, going into it. So it's not like we're going to be short on confidence, but no Norgaard. So probably a changed midfield. Well, definitely a changed midfield if the red card doesn't get rescinded. How are you feeling ahead of it, mate?
Well, I'm feeling confident going into this one. Keane Lewis Potter's going to score 3-0. Good evening, everybody.
Craig, you listen, see, great minds think alike. Well done, sir.
Obviously, we're going to have to see a slightly different change in midfield. To be honest with you, if we're going to keep Keane at left back, in an ideal world, I know you're going to say you want Fab in midfield here, but I'd have a single pivot instead of a double, because we normally have Norgaard and Jan out. Jensen can do that, by the way. He's a deep line ball playing midfielder. So it could be Jan out, Jensen and Damsgaard, because I'm still getting confused as to where Damsgaard's playing these last couple of games. Like, especially the Bournemouth game. I thought that he was left wing to start with, but he was drifting in so much. So I reckon it's a good opportunity to keep a little bit of a run going now. Did we have 2 home games prior to this, or just one? I can't even remember.
Just one.
Who did we play before Bournemouth? Oh, yeah. I purged that from my memory. That's why.
Good shot.
Yeah. So we're on a 3-game unbeaten run because that Monday night game didn't happen. So it's an opportunity to kickstart a little bit of a run. And when you look at the fixtures that we've got coming up, it'd be a good opportunity for us to pick up some points. And as Callum said, climb up to them European places, up the beach.
The only way is up. There we go.
I don't think Thiago starts. I think you're right. He probably gets a few more minutes off the bench. But I can see Keane playing at left back still, but a front 3 of Brian, Wisser, and Sharda. I think Sharda comes back in for this one. And a midfield 3 of Norgaard, Jensen. Sorry, not Norgaard. Janelt, Jensen, and Damsgaard. I think it gives us an opportunity to be a bit more attacking in a game rather than having 2 deep line midfielders. Let Jensen play the ball. Let Damsgaard do the work which he's been doing. And we all know what Janelt does. Does. I think it's a really good opportunity for us.
Yeah.
As we all know, I don't talk about us going to Europe, so. But yeah, I suspect it will be either Sharda or Carvalho, possibly Yarmo, but I don't think for this game. I think you'd want a more attacking change for this game. I think we can be a bit more attacking against a newly promoted team at home. with their manager situation, I'm not convinced they'll have a permanent successor in place by next week. I could be wrong, but it could just be, someone already on their coaching staff just stepping in. So it might not be the same as a new manager bounce if they had like a Graham Potter in charge, for example. But yeah, it definitely adds an element of unknown, an element of uncertainty. What will they change? The players might feel like they have something to improve. Sorry. I was quite shocked actually that they sacked their manager, to be honest, given that they're outside the relegation zone, newly promoted club. How realistically much higher did they think they could be? But yeah, I agree that it just adds an element of uncertainty. But I still think, given our upcoming fixtures, this is our best opportunity to get a win in the next 4 or 5 games. And I think we need to start off this period with another strong home performance and just replicate what we've been doing so far this season.
Yeah, another win sounds good. That will be a good place to wrap things up, guys. We'll be back with a Leicester preview in the week. There'll also be a full-time analysis video on my channel. The link for that will be in the description. If you haven't already watched the 5 things we've learned about Brentford this season, which is evergreen, so you can watch it whenever you like, the link for that video will also be in the description. Just before we get going, guys, remember to drop a comment down below with your thoughts ahead of the Leicester game. How do you think we played against Everton? Will Norgaard be a big miss in the Leicester game? Let us know in the comments section. Subscribe to the YouTube and Spotify channels and give us a follow on the socials at the Ealing Road on Twitter and at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. Gents, it's been
I'm
a
going to
pleasure.
say one thing before you go as well, everyone. I must say, well done to the women's team yesterday. They are through to the 3rd round of the FA Cup. For which
Have you seen their draw?
The big guns looking.
Yeah.
In. So about 40k up for grabs. So there you go. Job done. So there you go.
So we made it for a whole podcast without Callum freezing. Right at the end, right on cue. No, I did see their draw.
Am I back?
Yeah, no, you're back. It'll be interesting to see if they do that at the GTEC. I'm sure that we could get a good attendance if they did do that at the GTEC. But yeah, well done to the women's team, chaps. It's been a pleasure. We'll see you next week. Have the bees.
Thank you all.
Bees.
Yeah.